Hello there, people of the internet. So I have some surplus ammo here that I've made a couple videos on now. It's corrosive 8mm Mauser. This is Turkish surplus stuff. And the reason why I have made so much content on this stuff is whenever I come out and shoot this stuff, I'll make several videos on it because it's corrosive. And rather than come out, make one video, and then have to clean my rifle just to come out the next day, make another video, have to clean my rifle again, and so on and so forth, I'll come out with my 8mm Mauser, and I'll just run like a bunch of this ammo through it. This way I only have to clean the rifle once, and I'll make a bunch of videos about it. That being said, the ammo I'm running is not free. If you want to support my work, links to Utreon and Patreon are in the description below. That definitely helps me make content. But in the time of me making the content on this Turkish 8mm Mauser stuff, I always tell people about the dangers of this high-pressure ammunition. And one of the reasons why you don't want to run this stuff through, say, some kind of semi-automatic platform is this stuff runs much hotter than normal 8mm Mauser ammunition is supposed to. From something that is nice and strong, like a Mauser 98 bolt action, that's not really going to be much of a problem. This is an incredibly strong rifle. But you start leaning into something more like a 93 pattern like this Turkish Mauser, or maybe like an 88 pattern like what they used in the First World War. Those actions just aren't necessarily as strong, so I wouldn't run as much of this Turkish ammunition through it as I would, say, this Kar 98. I've ran a lot of this stuff through this Kar 98, and this Kar 98 eats it just fine. But this stuff right here runs much hotter due to powder degradation from improper storage over there, wherever it is that this stuff right here was stored. There's some speculation on how it's not powder degradation and how Turkey basically just made hotter ammunition. But Turkey was trying to make ammunition, from what I understand, that was like identical to the Germans' 8mm Mauser, their 154 grain stuff, not their 198 grain stuff. But they were trying to make ammunition that was similar to that, and this stuff is definitely much hotter than that. So maybe there was, I mean, this was, what, over 80 years ago that this happened. Maybe there was something that happened, and maybe Turkey got some proof loads or something, but this ammunition is substantially hotter than the German stuff. What I would like to do is I'd like to get my hands on some original German 154 grain projectiles, and 154 grain ammunition. And what I would do is I'd pull the bullets on both the Turkish stuff and the German stuff, and I'd see if there's more powder in the Turkish stuff than the German stuff. I do have German 198 grain, but that wouldn't tell us very much because it's a different size projectile. Thus, it's going to have different powder ratios. But if I could get the ammunition that this right here is supposed to mimic and see if there's potentially more powder in this than in the German stuff, then we'll know that this right here was based off of proof loads and not regular ammunition and was from the factory supposed to be hotter. But to my knowledge, I'm going to go ahead and give a caveat here. To my knowledge, it is from powder degradation due to improper storage of years of being stored over there in Turkey. I'm assuming this is Turkish ammunition. But I get people in the comments whenever I make videos about this kind of stuff. What if you just, pull the projectile out, take out the old degraded powder, put in new production powder, which is going to give you appropriate pressure curves, put the projectile back in. They asked me, could you still run that ammunition like that? I'm like, absolutely. As long as you reload it to proper spec, you reload with a good, proper kind of ammunition, and you reload it to a point to where it can safely fire with a 154 grain projectile, then yeah, that's no problem at all. But then I'll have people say, I just take the cartridge and I take the powder out, and then I take the primer out, because the primer is corrosive. And that is one of the downsides of surplus ammunition. You can't really reload the primer. I mean, there are people out there who have like the tools and equipment available to be able to reload primers on stuff like this. But this is Berdan primers. Now, this was a very popular priming system way back in the day. Not really so much nowadays. Nowadays, we've mostly moved on to boxer primers, because those are definitely easier to reload, unless you're talking like some cheap steel case stuff from Russia or something like that. But for the most part, nowadays, a lot of your brass case ammunition is going to be boxer primed, so it can be reloaded. Well, way back in the day, back when this stuff was being surplus back when this surplus was being created without much intention of reloading the brass case ammunition, they did not bother with boxer primers. They had Berdan primers, Berdan primers have the anvil built right into the cartridge, so you don't have to worry about having a secondary anvil, built directly into the primer. It's just an easier manufacturing process. And whenever you're making billions and billions of rounds of ammunition and you have no intention of reloading it, then there's no point in, trying to follow a more difficult manufacturing process. There's something crawling on me. What are you? Get out of here. Freaking fire ant in my ear. I'm glad he decided not to bite me. But whenever I get comments down below, that's a bird. Whenever I get comments down below of people talking about how they pull the primers out and the powder and they'll reload the brass casing and use the projectile with modern stuff to prevent not only issues with powder degradation, but to also prevent using corrosive primers. If you're using something that's like 60s or 70s surplus 7.62 NATO, for example, then yeah, that stuff might be boxer primed. And you might be able to actually reload that stuff, but we're talking, 40s 8mm Mauser ammunition here. That's Berdan prime. You're not going to reload it. I mean, there are people out there who can do it, but it's difficult, that's for sure. If you get yourself the proper equipment, then you can use the hydraulic method of filling the case with water, and then you take a tight spacer and you basically just smack it into the case, and that pushes out, from hydraulic force, pushes the primer out the bottom of the cartridge. And then you have to, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can rip the primer out of the cartridge and then reload it like that. There's just no good way of doing it because it mars up your case, or the hydraulic method is very unpredictable and unreliable. But boxer primed ammunition, literally just take a little poker and poke it through the center of the center of the primer cap, and it knocks the primer right out, and you get yourself some reloadable ammunition. So although yes, you could reload this surplus ammunition, I wouldn't really recommend it. Not only that, but this Turkish stuff is known to have really fragile brass. A lot of times you'll get, as a matter of fact, just double checking these, as I should always do. A lot of times with these you'll get cracked cases and whatnot, just because the brass on these is not all that great, and as a result they can be a little brittle. And you gotta figure 8mm Mauser is firing at several thousand PSI, so yeah, it's a thin brass case. Give it some leeway. Give it some leeway. Ow, man, this 154 grain 8mm Mauser stuff just kicks so hard on the shoulder. If you are, I guess I shot a little too high with that one. If you're a recoil junkie, then this stuff from a carbine length Mauser is definitely a fun time. I, however, am not a recoil junkie. Alright, well, a little bit of a summarization. Yeah, you can reload it. If you can do anything with Berdan primers, or if you have the knowledge of knowing that it is going to be boxer primed ammunition, then yeah, you could get that to reload as well. A lot of times what people will do is they'll get this surplus ammunition to use as components, but this stuff right here is roughly 40, maybe 45 cents a round, not including shipping, handling, taxes, etc., etc. So you're basically just getting the projectiles at that point, because you're going to get this ammunition and pull the bullets out, and then you don't want to use the powder because that's degraded, powder. That's the reason why you're not using it. You're not going to be able to use the brass because the brass is boxer primed, and the primer itself is corrosive, and it does not have an anvil in it, so it will not work. Or the brass itself is Berdan prime. The primer is corrosive, and it is also a Berdan primer and requires the anvil built directly into the brass case itself, so you wouldn't be able to throw it in a boxer primed cartridge and expect it to work. So that's just, at that point you're basically just getting these rounds for the projectile themselves, and if you're going to spend that much money on projectiles, then you could get yourself something modern production that's not surplus, that is match grade level projectiles. So getting this particular stuff, this Turkish 8mm Mauser ammunition, specifically for reloading purposes, I just wouldn't recommend it. Now some people ask, can you get this stuff and just pull the projectile off and then just lose 10 to 15% of the powder, put the projectile back on, and then fire it at well, by doing that, Hopefully you will not risk overpressures. God, I am thirsty. Hopefully you will not risk overpressures with something like that. I do not know specifically myself. I would have to play around with it to really figure out where the safe limits are. But a lot of people think whenever, I'm actually going to make a full-on video about this, so video incoming, whenever you download ammunition, that also downloads the pressure. Well, whenever you download ammunition enough to where the powder is not seating properly inside of the cartridge, once the primer goes off, it'll burn all of the powder at once versus burning powder front to, or back to front like it's supposed to burn. And whenever it burns all at once, you get a huge pressure spike. So you got to be careful if you decide to download your ammunition. Although I don't think a 10 to 15% downloading of this particular ammunition would cause any issue. I also don't know much about the powder that is being used, and I would have to figure out the powder that's being used and its burn rates and its actual pressures that it's running at to figure out whether or not that would be a safe amount, 10 to 15%. So I don't know the answer to that one myself. I'll go ahead and throw that in as a caveat here. Alright, well, thanks for watching, folks. I do appreciate your time. I'm going to go hydrate, my God. Like, subscribe, share, description below, link to all sorts of stuff. Go ahead and go check that out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'm also having a fantastic day. Today's a fun one. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.